Good morning to everyone. So glad to be here. What a beautiful facility you have. Just was admiring this coming in today. I understand that the $5 admission, someone was teasing me that was to come hear me this morning. So hopefully it'll be worth every dollar. We'll find out. Before I get started, I'd like to mention I have a special blessing here today. We have 4 generations of my family here today. So I'd like to mention them briefly. We have my grandmother, my kid's great-grandmother, Angie Andriata, who's here from Middletown, Ohio, and she's 96 years old. She's actually 92 years old, and I just love exaggerating her age. It just gets to her, so she's actually, she was waving at me in the back there, so. And I also have, of course, my parents, George and Rosemary Crow, are here. And my mother is, I won't say her age, I probably wouldn't get by with that, so. And also my aunt, my kid's great aunt, Victoria Summers, Vicki Summers is here from Middletown, Ohio as well. And then, of course, my wife and my 3 children, ages 10, 8, and 3. So anybody else have that sort of a blessing of 4 generations in one location here? I mean, that's something that's pretty rare, I would guess. So just very exceedingly grateful for that. Also got to see a good friend I hadn't seen in years, Bill Lusenheit. Stand up. No, I won't make Bill do that. Bill is one of the most interesting fellows I know. I've known Bill probably since the late 90s, I'm guessing. And Bill is, a very interesting man. He's an accomplished investment advisor. He's a radio host. He was a candidate for Congress at one point. He's an expert in sabermetrics, which is the analysis and the study of baseball statistics. Of all things. In short, Bill is just a Renaissance man in a crew cut, if you can picture that. So it's just, he's just an amazing fellow. I really, in all seriousness, I do really admire and respect Bill. And he has a lot of great insight. But as all good friends do, he had to give me a hard time. He said, Rich, I've got the closing prayer, so I'll have time to clean up whatever messes you make on the pulpit this morning. So I'm glad he can do that. Finally, I'd just like to mention what a privilege it is to be here, to be a part of the feast site that Mr. and Mrs. Dart have been so integral to and getting this going. And Mr. Dart is not someone actually I've got to spend a lot of time with over the years, but I've admired him from afar, having read his books, listened to his materials. Probably got to know Mr. Dart for the first time in the mid-90s when the church that I was a part of was going through some doctrinal challenges. And I was handed a tape that he had given. And I remember the topic. It was something to do with law and covenant. And the tape had been reproduced so many times and passed along that I could barely hear it. The reproduction quality was so poor. It had just been passed on time after time after time. Now we can just email those things, but even in the mid-90s, that wasn't really readily available to do that. But here's something I really appreciated about Mr. Dart. He had a unique way of getting to the truth, bringing clarity, but without beating up too much on the listener or on parties who might disagree with his point of view. And that's sort of a rare thing. It's too rare, not just in our background, but in the world. You can see that even in our political, the way that things are going today in our political system, that people too often can't disagree and can't bring clarity without being totally difficult about it. And Mr. Dart has that gift, and between you and me, I've prayed on occasion that I might be able to emulate that part of his presentation. I know others here feel the same way. So with that being said, we'll get started. Let's turn to Ephesians, the first chapter. Begin reading Ephesians chapter 1, verse 3. Praise be to God and Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in the heavenly realms with every spiritual blessing in Christ. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace, that he lavished on us with all wisdom and understanding, he made known to us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in Christ to be put into effect when the times reach their fulfillment, to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. On October 5th, we lost a very important person, not only to our nation, but to the world. I think history will look back and this person will be mentioned probably with the likes of Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell, perhaps. And that was, of course, Steve Jobs. He died on October 5th, and he was the co-founder of and chairman and chief executive of Apple. And, just by show of hands, how many of you use an Apple product? I know in my family, I've lost count of how many. Steve Jobs, sort of to summarize his life, he's the reason in the future we're going to touch computer screens, not make clicks on a keyboard. His products have changed the way we live. But several years ago, he was giving a speech, and he had been ill for a long time, and I suspect that when you become ill and you see that the end is near, perhaps, you become more philosophic. You step back and try and focus on the big picture. You don't have time for minutia when you're dying, candidly. And he said something very interesting in his speech that I'll read part of. He said, "You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever it is, you have to trust. This approach has never let me down and has made all the difference in my life." Now, I'm not sure what Steve Jobs trusted in. If I had to guess what I've read about him, he was what someone would describe as a spiritual person. I don't believe he was a Christian, but he had some sort of spirituality in his life. But however he came upon this, I think he did stumble upon a real truth. This idea that we do have to trust in something, and it does make a difference. What do you trust in? What do I trust in? We are blessed and cursed in living in extremely interesting times. I'm taken aback when I have time like at the feast to think about the world we live in. Anecdotally, I'll share a story to give you an idea to bring this to light. I had a luncheon meeting shortly before the Feast of Trumpets, so I told this anecdote at the Feast of Trumpets, so for some of you who heard this, forgive me, but I'll say it again. I had lunch with two fairly prominent businessmen in the Houston community where I live. In fact, one is a deputy city attorney in the city of Houston. And we were talking at lunch, and the topic turned to the current state of affairs in the world. And here were the three of us, very openly talking about the real possibility that the United States is in real trouble. And meaning real trouble, the world that they were talking about looked a lot like a scene from the movie Mad Max, if you know what I'm talking about, where people are driving around in pickup trucks, armed to the teeth. And we were having this conversation, could things degenerate to that point? Think about this. This is not some obscure discussion in the backwoods someplace. This is in a nice restaurant, Houston, Texas, men with suit and ties, seriously discussing, are we in real trouble? I'm on the elevator at work, and I've spent a lot of time in elevators. I work downtown. And all of a sudden someone will say, boy, what about all this debt our country's accumulating? We'll have discussions about economics on the way up the elevator. We're not talking about the weather anymore. What's going on? As I talk to folks from our background, in particular, Christians, people trying to seek God's will in their lives, I find that we don't need to be reminded so much that the world's in trouble. That's common knowledge. That's in the mainstream now. What I find that we need to be reminded of is, how do we get out of bed in the morning? How do we put one foot in front of the other and get through this mess? And then when you add on to that just the personal stories, the struggles that people are experiencing, lost jobs, health problems, just life in general. Things are not easy. And I find myself as I'm into middle age, I've lived enough years that I'm not exactly old, but I'm not exactly young anymore. And that's sort of a time to reflect and to really think about things. In fact, I'll put it this way, my number of feasts is in the 40s. It's pretty amazing. Think about that. It's a time to reflect. How do we get out of bed in the morning? What will make the difference for us? And I'm convinced that we have to trust in something. We have to do what Mr. Steve Jobs asked us to do, accept trust in the right thing. And that will make all the difference. So I have to give this caveat before we go forward that what I offer today is not the solution, because unfortunately life will remain difficult, although there will be blessings and mercies interspersed there. It won't be a grind entirely, but by and large life is difficult. That's the nature of it. And I can't hide that truth from you. I won't even try. But if we trust in the right thing, I'm convinced that the suffering will have meaning and that we can make it through, and make it through with relative amount of joy and peace. Let's look at one of our brethren who experienced many of the things we are. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 23. You see, the same man who wrote that God will bring unity to all things in the fullness of times earned the right to say that with a straight face, because he had experienced things that I'm grateful most of us have never had to experience. Let's look at 2 Corinthians 11. I'll begin reading in verse 23. We'll, of course, read from the life of Paul. The context here, I won't take a lot of time to dwell on it, but just simply to mention that his authority as an apostle was under attack at Corinth. And he was having to defend, in essence, his right to have apostolic authority. But let's just focus on this, what I'm about to read, just on its face. Let's just think about all the things that Paul experienced in his life. Verse 23. Are they servants of Christ, meaning my accusers, my attackers? I am of a mind to talk like this, because I am more. I have worked much harder. I've been in prison more frequently. I've been flogged more severely and been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I've received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I've been beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked, and I spent a night and a deep in the open sea. Just digress for a moment. That's the scenario of my nightmares. A night in the dark sea, floating out there. And they had sharks back in that era, I can promise you, in the Mediterranean. What a nightmare that would have been, and he experienced that. Let's continue. I have been constantly on the move, without a home. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger of my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger in the sea, and in danger of false believers. I've been bitten by a snake. I don't know if he mentioned that. He forgot to even mention that one. I have labored and toiled and have gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst, and have often gone without food. And I have been cold, and I have been naked. But besides all of this, I face daily the pressure of my concern for the churches. Paul could relate to what we're experiencing today in our nation. And not only that, he didn't mention this, but he lived in a time where he had to be aware that tough times were coming politically. He was just a generation, when he said these things, he was a generation or two away from the Romans marching on Jerusalem. Paul was a cosmopolitan man of the world. He knew the political setting. He knew things were going to get tough. But yet he managed to write those encouraging words that in the fullness of time, God will bring unity to all things. Despite all of this, he could give us that hope. Paul clearly trusted in something. And we can be grateful that he told us what he trusted in. And I'd like to share that with you in a few moments. I don't watch a lot of sitcoms or shows on television, but I do enjoy watching old movies. I watch movies and sports and things like that, probably more than I should, but it's a way to unwind. And there's an old movie that, it's old now, it's probably working on 30 years old, probably more like 20 years old, a movie called City Slickers. I won't ask for a show of hands who's seen that, but most of you are probably familiar with the premise. And forgive me for sharing Hollywood anecdotes here, but I think this one's appropriate. In this movie, it involves the story of 3 New Yorkers who are about my age, middle-aged men who are struggling, and one of the men in particular is ordered by his wife to go to a dude ranch for 2 weeks and to, quote, get his smile back. And so he agrees. And in the course of this adventure on the dude ranch in New Mexico, they meet up with an old grizzled cowboy named Curly, played by Jack Palance. So you can picture, that was the perfect casting if there ever was one. And one character and Jack Palance's character are having a very important conversation on horseback, riding through the mountains one day. And Jack Palance's character is named Curly, who looks at the middle-aged, the fellow in the middle-aged crisis, midlife crisis, and he says, "Son, do you know what the secret of life is?" Anybody remember this scene? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It was a pivotal scene in the movie. And the character looks back at Curly and says, "No, what?" And Curly looks in his eyes and holds up a finger and says, "Just one thing." And then Billy Crystal looks at Jack Palance and says, "What, your finger?" And he says, "No, just one thing. You stick to this one thing, and the rest of life doesn't mean anything." Billy Crystal asks, "That's great, but what's the one thing?" And Curly says, "That's what you've got to figure out." Well, brethren, that's what we've got to figure out. It's this knowledge, it's this really, what I'm going to say, 2 things that I'm about to share with you. It's how we get out of bed in the morning. It's how we get through trials with grace, with hope. And I want to mention one thing, having had experienced some trials in my own life recently, that sometimes in the moment that the crisis we become aware of the crisis, it's not like this knowledge is a panacea. There's going to be grief. There's going to be difficulties. One thing we don't want to do as someone who's just been shocked with a trauma is to be philosophic. That's just the wrong timing. You just have to be there. But this knowledge I've experienced in my own life, I can guarantee this knowledge does, over time, bring us back to equilibrium. It brings us back to that peaceful state where we have to exist to thrive and prosper in this crazy world we live in. And I'll say, instead of Curly, it's one thing. The Apostle Paul would have said it's just 2 things. Let's go to Romans 8 and see what those 2 things are. The Apostle Paul, who had experienced so much in his life, when someone who's experienced a lot tells you to hang in there, it means something. And certainly, Paul had experienced a lot in his life. So this is the first thing, Romans 8:18. And to make things even better, these scriptures that I'm about to read are easy to remember. Even the numbering will be very easy to remember. Romans 8:18. Paul simply says, "I reckon that the sufferings of the present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us." Let's just let that sink in for a moment. If I were to say this to my 10-year-old daughter, who's now of the age she's starting to ask questions about life, I wouldn't say, "I reckon, Haley, that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that God will reveal in you." But what would I say? I'd say, "Haley, whatever you are going through right now, whether you're having to deal with little girls at school who are sometimes not as nice as they should be, whether maybe you're stressed out by the math test that you have tomorrow, maybe things that are worse, maybe a friend is sick. No matter what you are going through, what God has in mind will be much better than what you can even imagine. Give me your best dream. Create for me your greatest day, And what God has in mind will be much better for you. I'll use this analogy. For some reason, it seems to work. I've used this before, and people seem to relate to this. I don't know what it says about us, but picture, if you will, that you go into your office on a Monday morning, and your boss comes in and says, you're laid off, you have to be out of here in 3 hours. That's the way it happens now. Sometimes they don't even give you 3 hours. They say you're laid off, get your stuff and get out. Sometimes accompanied by a security guard. We don't even lay people off as gently as we used to. So you're in there on a Monday morning, and then you're on your way home, and some creditor calls and says, by the way, this debt we've been talking about, we want it now. We want the money today. Then you get a call from a loved one later. This is on Monday, on the same day. It says, I've just been diagnosed with this very, bad disease. I won't get too specific, but you can fill in the blanks from your own life experience. Then before you get home, the phone rings again. It's a teacher from your child's school. Your so-and-so just did something. They're in an office. You need to come deal with this. Just pile on whatever you can imagine. But suppose in the midst of all this, you had this knowledge that on Friday afternoon, the lottery ticket you bought for the multi-state Powerball, $300 million, was in your back pocket. And you knew it. I won't tell you how, but let's just say you knew it. There's rumors in my family that some of previous generations used to run numbers illegally in the basement. So I relate to the lottery, I have to admit to you. But picture that. It's a silly analogy, but you know what I'm saying. If your world was falling apart on Monday, but you knew on Friday afternoon you were cashing in the winning lottery ticket, how would things change for you? You'd be a little less stressed out. It wouldn't be pleasant. The week's still going to be tough, okay? Things are still there to deal with. And let's assume that the illness that you were dealing with was something that could be cured, but it just needed money. Any problem that can be solved with money is not something we ought to be that uptight about, a wise man used to tell me. But let's say that you would have that. Well, this is what God is telling us in Romans 8:18, that the sufferings, whatever you're experiencing right now, will pale in comparison to that moment when glory is revealed in you. And let's think about how that will happen. Those of us who are blessed to die a good death, and this is what I mean by a good death, that you're surrounded by family members and not experiencing much pain. I wish that for all of us. We have to die, it's just a matter of how. Do you realize that at the next moment of your consciousness, this glory will be revealed? It will be instantaneous, how I picture it. Your eyes will close, and the next thing, it's like there will be no time had passed. The lottery ticket will be cashed right at that moment. Let that sink in for a moment, and let's read verse 19 in Romans 8. For the earnest expectation of the creation itself is awaiting the manifestation of the sons of God, because the creation was subjected to vanity, but not willingly, but by reason of him who subjected it in hope, in order that the creation itself might be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that all the creation is groaning together and travailing together until now. And not only that, but even we ourselves, that we are the firstfruits of the Spirit, that groan within ourselves, awaiting the sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For by hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is not hope. For why would we hope for anything but hoping? Why would anyone still be hoping for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we ourselves wait for it with patience. And that's all there is. We have to just wait with patience. But we're sitting on the winning lottery ticket. It's just all we have to do is wait patiently. So that's the first thing. That whatever we're going through is worth it because of what God has in mind. That's simple knowledge. It's not something you haven't heard before. But I'm convinced that we have to be more convicted of it than ever if we're to thrive in what we're experiencing. And then the second thing, Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And that's the second thing. No matter what we're experiencing, God will bring it together for good. Now, that doesn't mean that every trial, every thorn in our side will be removed. I wish I could tell you that, speaking as a man. Even in my own life, I know that there are things that we're dealing with that are just going to be part of what we'll have to deal with in life. But what I take comfort from in this scripture is that God will use these circumstances to teach me what I need to learn, to get me where I need to be, and to finish the work that he started in me. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to wonder how it's going to work out. In fact, I've found that sometimes spending a lot of time trying to ask why and figure these things out are just not classes we ought to enroll in. We need to just trust that while we will suffer, the suffering has meaning because we are in God's care. God doesn't remove the suffering, but he does promise, I believe, that the suffering will have meaning and in the fullness of time will be brought together for the good, for our good. When I graduated from high school, my principal was kind of a character. And he was talking to us, sort of giving the farewell speech. And he said something to this effect. I'll try and paraphrase. It's been many years, more years than I'll care to share with you. But he said something to the effect that life is hard. Picture now a bunch of 18-year-old kids full of energy and optimism sitting in the audience listening to this. He said, life is difficult. It's like a game of Monopoly. You'll go around the board chasing money, and when it's over, they throw you in a box. And I remember my jaw dropping. You know, I was like, what is he talking about? I can't wait to get out and go do whatever I do. I got energy and time, you know. What are you talking about? And in a way, he's right. But here's the difference. Here's what he didn't tell us. He said, but if you are a Christian, if you know the things that I've just told you, that trip around the board can be full of adventure, unexpected mercy, joy, the ability to focus in life on what's really important. Do you know how much freedom that brings? People that don't love God and aren't hoping for God's word to be spread among the nations and don't have that bigger purpose in their life, what are they about? And that's not, I don't mean to put anyone down. Some of my friends have been so good to me, people that don't have this hope. So this is not a judgment, it's just an observation. What do they have to live for? I feel bad for them. I don't feel like I'm superior to them. I feel bad. I wish I could share with them that knowledge. It makes life so much more bearable. And what a blessing it is to know this, to have this truth. So my principal only had it half right. He was right and he was wrong, as they say. Life is a dash around a board chasing a few bucks. I mean, I go to work every morning. That's kind of the reality. But I know two things. I know that all these sufferings will mean nothing when I receive my reward. And I know that God will see it through. Two things I've learned to never apologize for. And one is ending early and you give a sermon. I had a young man one time come up, and I'm not quite done. I don't want to get your hopes up, but I probably won't. The air just lifted. Everyone took a deep breath like, oh, you're our man. Yeah, we like you. You know. But I remember one time when I was just probably one of the first sermons I gave, I ended quite early, and a young man came running up to me and said, wow, that took a lot of courage to end early. And I said, guy, I didn't have anything else to say. It would have taken courage to keep speaking for another 15 minutes. That would have been the gutsy call there. So never apologize for that, but also never apologize for reminding you of the things you already know. Because I have found that when things get tough, I wasn't in the military, so I should be careful about giving these analogies, but I've been told, I've been read, that when things get tough, when the bombs drop and the bullets start flying, you don't remember the complicated things. You've got to trust that the basic things you understood are really instinctive to you. So when the bombs start falling in your life, and I'm sorry, they're going to, if you remember the two things I've told you, if you remember Romans 8:18 and Romans 8:28, if you knew nothing else, you can stand on those two verses. Let's go to Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11. These are some verses that we often read at the feast, and I think you'll see why here in a moment. Begin in verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. That sounds like a good working definition of trust to me. Because a faint hope is kind of weak. Trust is something a little more solid. It's based on substance. It's based on real belief, experience, thought, not just some sort of faint hope. Verse 2, for by this kind of faith the elders obtained a good report. By faith we understand that the worlds were created by the word of God, so that the things that are seen were made from the things that are invisible. By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts. And through it, though he died, he is yet speaking. His suffering had purpose. He still speaks to us today. By faith Enoch was transported so that he would not look upon death, and was not found because God had transported him. For before his departure, he was testified of him that he pleased God. Now without faith it is impossible to please God, for it is mandatory for the one who comes to God to believe that he exists and that he is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Verse 7, by faith Noah, after being divinely instructed by God about the things he could not yet see, was moved with fear and prepared an ark for the salvation of his house, through which he condemned the world because heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Chapter 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham, being called of God to go out into the place that he could later receive for an inheritance, obeyed and went, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he sojourned in a land of promise like a foreigner, dwelling in the tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob and joint heirs of the same promise. For he was waiting for the city with the foundations of God, who is the architect and the builder. By faith also Sarah herself received power to conceive seed and gave birth when she was well beyond the childbearing age, because she esteemed him faithful who had personally promised her a son. Because of this faith, there came into being from one man, and moreover one who was reproductively dead, descendants as numerous as the stars of the heavens and as countless as the sand of the seashore. But all of these died, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar, and having been persuaded of them, and having embraced them, and having confessed that they were strangers and sojourners on this earth. For those who say such things make it manifest that they seek their own country as promised by God. And if on the one hand they had let their minds dwell fondly on the place where they had come from, they might have had an opportunity to return. But now on the other hand, they are aspiring to a more excellent country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, because he has prepared a city for them. If we trust that God has prepared this city for us, if we trust in that one thing, it will make all the difference in our lives. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here today. And it's my prayer that maybe we can meet up again sometime in the future. And then secondarily, that Bill Lusenheit won't have to spend too much time cleaning up the mess that I just made. So thank you very much.